Hello and welcome to our video. Today we're going to be discussing water and its relationship to biology. So we have four themes that we're going to be covering today: the polar covalent bonds of water, the four emergent properties of water, basic biochemistry, and acidity. So let's start off with our first theme, polar covalent bonds of water. And so water is a polar molecule, and the main reason that it's polar is because of the difference between the oxygen atom and the two hydrogen atoms. The difference in electronegativities between those is pretty high, and so because of that, water is one of the most electronegative or most polar molecules. And so water molecules will constantly hydrogen bond with other water molecules because negatively charged oxygen is attracted to the positively charged hydrogen. So here we have an example of this. So as you can see right here, we have a hydrogen bond between the oxygen and this hydrogen in these two separate water molecules. And you can see this little thing that looks kind of like an 8 right here. This is the Greek letter delta, and the delta plus indicates a partial positive charge on the sides of the hydrogen, and the delta negative represents this slight negative charge on the side of the oxygen. So then we move on to our four emergent properties of water. These are cohesion, surface tension, high specific heat, and versatile solvency. So cohesion is the ability of water molecules to kind of stick to each other, and this happens a lot primarily because of this hydrogen bonding. And despite hydrogen bonding being really weak, if it happens constantly, it can create a pretty strong force. Take, for example, how a gecko moves up a wall. There's constant hydrogen bonds going on, and despite each of those individual bonds being pretty weak, the gecko can move up the wall because there's just so many hydrogen bonds at one time. Surface tension is obviously the ability of water to resist gravity, so that's why you can add quite a considerable amount of water droplets onto a penny before the water breaks apart and spills over. Then we have our high specific heat, so that's why water has a relatively high boiling point, 212 degrees Fahrenheit or 100 degrees Celsius. And versatile solvency, I really want to address a misconception here. Water is often considered to be a universal solvent, but this is not true. Because if water was a universal solvent, then every time we drank water, our bodies would literally collapse because it would dilute literally every organ and cell and everything in our body. But that's not the case. But water can still dissolve most things, however, and so that's why versatile solvency is one of the four emergent properties of water. Let's talk about some basic biochemistry here, because chemistry, as we covered already, is really, really important to biology because there's so many metabolic reactions and chemical reactions that govern biology. And so first we have to go over what a hydrophilic substance is. Hydro comes from the Greek meaning water, and philic also is Greek for loving. So hydrophilic substances are water loving, or they have affinity for water. And so an example of this would be, say, table salt. Table salt has a great affinity of water, NaCl that is. Has a great affinity for water, and so it easily dissolves in water for that reason. Whereas hydrophobic substances, the Greek root phobia, means obviously fear, and then hydro is water, and so these hydrophobic substances do not have affinity for water. A good example of this would be oil. That's why when you try and put oil in water, it'll always separate, it'll never mix together. So molarity is this concept which is the number of solutes per liter of solution. So for example, this example right here, 2H2, we would read this 2 moles of dihydrogen. And think of it like a dozen. When we're baking, we use dozens, which means 12. Like that, we use moles, which is a certain fixed quantity in chemistry. Then we have acidity. So acidity is obviously the measure of how many H plus ions are in a solution. So they're measured on the pH scale. And this ranges from 0, which is the most acidic, all the way up to 14, which is least acidic. Now the opposite of acidic is basic. So 14 would be the most basic on the pH scale, and then we have 0, which is the most acidic. So here's the formula for pH. So if you're given the hydrogen concentration relative to solution, you plug this in, negative log of that number, and you get your pH value. So a pH buffer is an acid-base pair, which combines with hydrogen ions, which nullifies acidification. So a good example of this would be, say, bicarbonate, HCO3-. And that is for example, when some patients have difficulty breathing, doctors often prescribe bicarbonate because it addresses acidification, which results from the combining of carbon dioxide with other chemicals that are in the body, and so bicarbonate prevents the acidification, which relieves those shortness of breath symptoms. So pH is really crucial to a lot of biological activities. For example, ocean acidification will result in the death of small sea creatures because the shells of these creatures are calcium carbonate, and when they react with hydrogen ions, they kind of break apart, and so this obviously kills the animal because it can't survive without the shell. So a drop in pH in the blood in humans can cause difficulty breathing. And so water and biochemistry are really, really important to biology, and they form the backbone for a lot of the higher level concepts like ecology and those kinds of things, which focus on individual organisms. But what happens at the chemical and atomic level is really, really important too. So thank you for watching. Please subscribe and like to this video.